Hello, my lovely book friends. I'm Addie and you are now watching Books and Tea Time. I've got my ugly sweater on and I am ready to dish about the worst books that I read this year and to gush about the best books that I read this year. So I have been doing this format for the past 2 years, I think, so I'll have my previous best and worst books of the year videos linked in the description box and up above. I love doing these videos. It's just really fun recap of all the books that I've read throughout the year. And so what I do is I pick 5 best books of the year and 5 worst. So really the two ends of the spectrum of my reading year. But then also to kick off the video, I list all of the honorable mentions, which is basically all of my 5 and 4.5 stars that almost made the cut. This was one of the hardest years I've had in a really long time. I probably said the same thing last year, but honest to God, it was really, really hard for me to pick my top 5. I feel like I cut out some golden gems, so I'm gonna shout all of those out, all of the honorable mentions. Basically, it's just a list of everything I rated 5 stars this year, which is probably going to surprise some of you because I'm pretty sure I only did 1 wrap-up this year because I have just sucked at doing my wrap-ups. So hopefully we're going to correct that next year and do proper, timely wrap-ups of the books that I read. But yeah, so we're going to talk about 5 best, 5 worst. Again, this is just my opinion. I hope I don't offend anybody too badly, but I mean, you're probably gonna dislike some of my favorites and I'm gonna dislike some of your favorites. Starting off with my honorable mentions, I have my trusty dusty laptop here with all of my sticker paraphernalia. I was gonna put it in order of how I read them this year, but it ended up getting pretty janky, so this is not in any specific order at all. I recommend all of these books, so if you have been on the fence about reading them, definitely do it. They're all incredible, amazing for different reasons. So yeah, first and foremost, we have A Prayer for the Crown Shy by Becky Chambers. This is the sequel to A Psalm for the Wild-Built. They're amazing sci-fi novellas, highly recommend. I also read volumes 1 through 3 of Lore Olympus this year, gave all of them 5 out of 5. I am obsessed with the Lore Olympus webtoons graphic novel series. They're amazing. Saga Book 1 by Brian K. Vaughan. You'll notice this is kind of a trend. I read a lot of graphic novels this year, but Saga Book 1 was perfection. Again, I can't wait to read Book 2 and 3, which is like a compilation of a bunch of the issues. Don't Call Us Dead by Danez Smith was a poetry collection that I read, 5 out of 5 stars. I also read 1 through 4, every volume of Heartstopper, gave them all 5 out of 5 stars. Again, I'm obsessed just as much as everybody else who has any social media or Netflix has become obsessed with Nick and Charlie, obviously. The show's amazing. I read the graphic novels before the show was announced, and then the show was announced and then I watched it and it was just amazing. Read This to Get Smarter by Blair Imani, a very short non-fiction book that I really liked. Highly recommend. I think everybody should read this. I think it should be required reading in school. Blair Imani is just so eloquent in the way that she conveys material to people. She is an educator, so you can tell that she is a very knowledgeable educator who is good at her craft, so I highly recommend that. I also read 1 through 3, all the volumes of The Tea Dragon Society by Kay O'Neill. I think it's The Tea Dragon Society, The Tea Dragon Festival, and The Tea Dragon Tapestry. I think that's the order. They are the most wholesome, charming, middle grade fantasy graphic novels. Escaping Exodus by Nikki Drayden. A fantastic and so unique science fiction book that I read this year. Upright Woman Wanted. It's the first book that I read and it was absolutely amazing. A great way to kick off the year. A short, fun novella, and it also kicked off my reading of many of Sarah Gailey's works and my new obsession with them as an author, and I have been slowly making my way through their backlist throughout the year. No Gods, No Monsters by Cadwell Turnbull. Another, kind of, I would say, urban sci-fi, how there's urban fantasy. It's kind of sci-fi, but it's also a little fantastical. So urban fantasy, modern contemporary fantasy, speculative fiction, so good. I think about that book so much, and I read it in February, but I think about it once a month at the very minimum, and it's just so good. Pet by Kweke Emezi, a middle grade / YA utopian slash maybe dystopian story by the ones and only Okweke Emezi. Love and Other Disasters by Anita Kelly, a wonderful, adorable food romance. Got the competition, got like the enemies to friends to lovers trope, and has a non-binary main character written by a non-binary author. Love After the End by Joshua Whitehead. It's a collection of speculative fiction and science fiction stories from Indigenous and Two-Spirit authors. Everything for You by Chloe Leese. This came out in the spring, and you're probably shocked to hear that it's not in my top 5. This is the one that it actually pains me not to put in my top 5, but we'll get to that later on in the video. But this is the 5th book in the Bergman Brothers series by my beloved romance babe queen Chloe Leese, the best of the best. A Court of Mist and Fury. I originally rated this 4-star, but I recently reread the entire ACOTAR series because I got the box set for my birthday, and I literally binge read all of them and annotated them, and I bumped this one up to a 5-star because I just had to. So yeah, there's that. A Dowry of Blood by S.T. Gibson, a Dracula's Bride retelling. Last but not least, She Who Became the Sun by Shelley Parker Chan. I read this one in January of this year, so it's a very long time ago for me, but another one that I still really think about and think about how much I enjoyed, so gotta give it a shout out. It's a Mulan meets Song of Achilles, but also just a really fun, like, military-based fantasy vibe. Now let us take a brief turn towards the sad part of this video, the difficult part, which is to talk about the worst books that I read this year. The criteria for this is either that I just really didn't enjoy it, or another reason that I put some of these on here is that they were just disappointing. So it's not that they're all terrible, or even that I don't recommend all of these, but it's just like either they were really truly and honestly bad, or they were just really let me down and disappointed me and weren't what I thought that they were gonna be, and therefore made it on this list. Because I mean, like, I really read a lot of good books, because I don't like to read something unless I already like the author or many people have recommended it to me, because I just have so many books on my TBR that I want to read that I will not read something that gets lukewarm opinion from like the booktubers that I trust, or from like people at work that I share a lot of reading tastes with. So like if somebody that I know and trust doesn't like a book, I'm probably not gonna read it. But I don't know. That's not true for everything. Like, I tried ACOTAR this year and then ended up really liking it, even though I thought I was gonna hate it. So I don't know if that's the way I'm gonna live my life forever, but at this point in my reading journey, I just don't want to read things that are like mediocre, you know? That being said, let's just dive into this. Okay, again, in no particular order. These aren't numbered like 1 to 5 or like worst to like least worst. They're just on this list. First and foremost, we have Watchmen by Alan Moore. And I know a lot of people are probably going to come at me for this one because it's literally one of the most popular graphic novels in the graphic novel canon. Every list that I look for, like, graphic novels people have to read, best graphic novels, this is on every goddamn list. And Alan Moore is on every list. And so, like, I objectively know that this is not a bad graphic novel because it's very popular. A lot of people like it. And I see, to a certain extent, the appeal of it, but when I tell you it was painful having to force my way through this book, though I would have DNF'd it if I wasn't reading it for book club, but I run a graphic novel book club and I had to finish it because I am literally in charge of reading it, so I'm not going to show up having not read the book. But it was like pulling teeth, forcing myself to sit down and turn the pages and read this book. It was painful. I was bored, but also just like uninterested for a lot of it. It was one of those things that like I didn't hate it because I enjoyed discussing it at book club, and I feel like after book club I was like, was I too harsh on the book with my rating? But then I went back and I was like, no, because I didn't like it. There's some things in it that made me super like uncomfortable, and I feel like the book like kind of endeavors to make you uncomfortable because it's all about like morality and the gray areas of morality and humanity and all that like philosophical jazz, I guess. It's just not really my vibe. I'm just not really into that kind of stuff. again, a disappointment, because I went into it thinking this is one of the most popular graphic novels of all time. It's gotta be amazing. Like, it's like when you read Saga. Like, I loved Saga because it's so popular and with good reason, it's amazing. But then I read this and I was just like, really? Like, how is this not a little bit problematic? I don't know. I feel like it's popular because it's like one of the first graphic novels, from what I understand. It's like when comics kind of transition to graphic novel. I'm not judging you if you liked it, but it was not my jam. Okay, next up we have one that, again, it really pains me to put on this list. And that is A People's History of the Vampire Uprising by Raymond A. Villarreal. I came across this at work one day when I was like going through the stacks, and it's the cover is eye-catching, the premise is eye-catching. It's like a modern take on a vampire narrative. And here's what makes it difficult to explain my feelings about this book is I think that this book is brilliant in its discussion of vampirism and its use of vampirism to analyze pop culture and modern society. I think it is brilliant that the way the author uses vampirism in the narrative. However, this book is so goddamn boring. The beginning is interesting because it's like suspenseful. It's when like the vampirism is spreading. It's an epidemic and you see it from like the beginning as it's like growing. It's kind of like The Stand in that way, where you have like some sort of apocalyptic event and you're watching it from like the very beginning all the way as like it blows up, or like The Walking Dead. And then it just becomes like you're reading a history book. And again, the way that it's written that way, as like this snapshot of a historical moment where it's like interviewing different people or like from different people's perspectives, it's like, it's so brilliant, but the execution is just so boring. It's so boring. I don't know how else to explain it other than I almost DNF'd it so many times because I was so bored. And I feel really bad saying it because I do, like, in my heart of hearts, I know it's a good book. But I was so bored that I just couldn't rate it highly. I think I also gave this a 2.5 star. I was just like, this hurts me. It hurts me to rate you low, but like, why didn't more things happen? There's just like no action. We're gonna jump into Frankenstein by Junji Ito. So I, again, as you've noticed, have been dipping my toes into graphic novels and manga throughout the year. And so I've heard amazing things about Junji Ito. Admittedly, this is my first Junji Ito that I've ever read, and the only one I've read so far. What I dislike about this is like the first 80% of this is essentially just a graphic novelization of Frankenstein, like an illustrated version of the text in the manga format. And then all of a sudden at like the 95% mark, the story is wildly altered. And to me, I'm just like, if you're going to do this, right, you either do it and commit to just illustrating Frankenstein in this like horror Junji Ito style, or you retell Frankenstein entirely. But I really disliked that like whole chunk of one take on the story, and then suddenly at the end, and then like the very end, like that end of the book is also the same. So I just wasn't a huge fan of that. I don't know. I was a little bit just confused by that decision, and I think it really pulled me out of the narrative to the point where I was just like, it was not what I was expecting. I was expecting a very like gruesome horror Frankenstein retelling with like some new elements, and it was not that at all. And I don't think it is going to deter me from reading other Junji Ito, but I just don't know that I would recommend this one to other people. The next one we have is A Proposal They Can't Refuse by Natalie Kanya. This one is probably the one that deserves to be on this list the least because it's not a bad romance. I actually think that if you are a fan of the more mild, like 2-star spice level romances, that you would like this a lot. It's a pretty cute romance. I liked the characters. The male main character is Irish, and I kind of liked the little tidbits of Irish heritage, and the female main character is Puerto Rican. So it was cool to see like their like childhood friends, enemy becoming fake engaged vibe. However, I just realized this year as I was reading that I just am not a fade to black girly. I know, especially if it's not a YA romance, I need some spice. I need some smut in my romance books. And this was a fade to black, and I was not expecting it to be. I think that's what got me, is I have a certain expectation for romance books with like the cutesy covers. Like, it just reminds me of like the Brown Sisters trilogy. And I'm just like, why was there no spice? Where was it? Where was the oomph, the smuttiness, the steaminess? It was just flatline. And that really jarred me, and it was not what I wanted. And so I got angry. I still think I gave it like a 3-star. So it's not a bad book. I do recommend it, again, if you like the mild romance, but it was just not for me. I've just discovered that I need to know a spice rating before I go into a book, again, because I don't want to read books that I'm not gonna like. Last in the worst category, this book does deserve to be on here, and I'm about to roast it, so don't come at me if you like this book, but this is actually like my #1 most disappointing and like infuriating read of the year, and that is Electra by Jennifer Saint. I read Ariadne last year, and Ariadne was good. I gave it like a 4-star. Realistically, it's probably a 3-star, but I really liked the ending, so I gave it a 4-star. This is Jennifer Saint's second book, her sophomore novel, and oh my god, did she fall into the sophomore slump pit. When I tell you, this book is supposed to be a retelling of the Trojan War from the perspective of Electra, Clytemnestra, and Cassandra. Yes, it's a retelling of the Trojan War from the perspective of these 3 women, and it's supposed to add something new, add something interesting. This book is basically a book about Agamemnon. All Electra does is think about him and talk about him and mention him. Like, her whole entire personality as a character is she hates her mom and she wants her dad to come back from war, and like, oh, glorify my dad, I love him, and like this and that, blah blah blah. Like, all the characters are so flat, they're so one-sided. It's just like, it's not even a retelling. It's just telling the Trojan War and talking about Agamemnon and everything that he was, and like justifying his behavior kind of, but like also trying to not justify it, because like you've got like Clytemnestra's perspective and then you've got Electra's perspective, but like the end was not good, and it was just like boring. Nothing really happened, and it's just all about how these women's lives revolve around Agamemnon, even when he's not there for 10 years. And it's just so frustrating to see a retelling that's supposed to center a female voice that is so honed in on this ultra male presence. It was just disappointing. That being said, I am still gonna read her new book that comes out in 2023. She's writing a book about Atalanta. I'm very excited. I still like Jennifer Saint and I like her writing, but girl, you can do better. You could do so much better than that. I just feel like it was like a forced, like rushed process, and it could have been so much more. Now that we've got the crap out of the way, we can move on to my top 5, my best books of 2022. Can you guess them? Pause the video now, comment down below, and see if you can guess one of them. If you do, you win my virtual hug. Love you. I'll save my top 2 for last, because I don't really have any order, but I do know what like my like top that are like fighting for the #1, so to speak, are. So first and foremost, we're going to talk about a book that I read at the very beginning of the year, and I'm pretty sure I said in my review of this book that it's gonna make my top 5, and it did, and that is Once There Were Wolves by Charlotte McConaughey. This book was so good, and like it's kind of like a suspense contemporary thriller. Like, it's very hard to pin down the genre for this book, but I don't even read any of the genres that I just mentioned. I don't really read thriller or suspense books. I don't read a lot of contemporary, but this was so good. It's about 2 twin sisters, and you're following the perspective of one of the sisters. She has a condition called mirror touch synesthesia, where if she sees pain happening to somebody else, she feels as though it's happening to her. So if somebody gets punched in the face and she sees it, she will feel as though she was punched in the face. and that pain, her body perceives that pain as though it's happening to her. She grows up to become like an environmentalist of some kind, where she, at the beginning of the book, is traveling to Scotland to reintroduce wolves into a rural Scottish area. And it's all about her, and she has her sister with her, and her sister have experienced some trauma that is like laced with mystery. And so part of the book is you trying to unravel what happened to the sister, what happened to them when they were young, when they lived with their father. So you're figuring out their childhood, you're figuring out a more recent trauma that her sister's recovering from, and then you're also on the flip side dealing with and seeing the villagers in this town resisting the reintroduction of these wolves and the concern for like their lives and their animals' lives, their crops, their livestock, things like that. The main character being frustrated with that and trying to defend the presence of these wolves because someone is found murdered or presumably found dead, and they think that the whole town thinks that a wolf did it, and so the main character is trying to prove that a wolf did not kill this person. Really fascinating. I loved the information that we get about wolves. The story sits with me so much. I really liked the ending. I feel like the author just did so well and did such an amazing job writing the story. It was fast, it was interesting, it was like heartbreaking and also heartwarming and just emotional. I just really loved it. And again, this is a book I think about a lot throughout the year that I want to hopefully purchase and reread at some point, because I did read it. I got a copy from my library out, so I really loved it and I highly recommend it. Next, we have River of Teeth by Sarah Gailey. As I said, I have been reading a lot of Sarah Gailey's backlist this year after reading Upright Women Wanted and as my first read of the year. And this book, and it's like a duology, a short story kind of duology. Both of them are incredible. They're combined under the title of American Hippo, but the first one is River of Teeth and the second one is Taste of Marrow, I think. And they are both books that are kind of alternate histories about a version of the American like South with like this like Western vibe, but instead of horses they ride hippos. And basically it's like a what if the American government introduced hippos as a livestock into the Mississippi River and it went badly, and now there are feral hippos everywhere and there are like hippo riders and hippo wranglers, and it's just so creative and so fun. It's actually based on something that almost did happen. Like Sarah Gailey says this literally almost happened. They almost brought hippos over in like the 1800s because there was a beef shortage of some sort, I think, or some kind of like meat shortage, and so they almost imported hippos and put them in the Mississippi River to breed them for an alternate meat source, and they didn't, obviously, but this is like kind of like a what if that did happen. And it's just like a queer Western story where the characters ride hippos instead of horses. It's just brilliant. It's so good. It's so well written. I really love the characters. It was funny. It was fast. It was just perfect. I don't know. I loved it. And I'm hoping to get my hands on a copy that I can reread and annotate. Next, this should come as a surprise to no one. I had a whole dedicated reading vlog to this book. Also, I had another book in this series in my best of the year last year, and that is Rhythm of War by Brandon Sanderson. I started this book last year and I finally finished it in the summer, I think. I don't even know. It took me like almost 6 months to read this book, but it was worth every single moment that I took to read it. It is just exceptional. The Stormlight Archive is amazing. Words of Radiance was in my top 5 last year, which is the second book. This is the fourth book. I haven't decided yet if this one's my favorite or if Words of Radiance is my favorite. This one is very emotional and heavy hitting, but like it's amazing. It's the best fantasy ever. I love Brandon Sanderson's writing. I can't wait for book 5 to come out. And this was just another great installment in the story. As you can see, I annotated the crap out of it. Every single time I see somebody check this out at the library, I'm like, you're in for a ride. Come back and talk to me when you're done, because I can't shut up about how good this series is. So obviously number 3, Rhythm of War. Okay, we're down to the nitty and the gritty. My top 2 books of the year here. Where should I go? We've got a fantasy and we've got a romance. Where should I go next? I don't know. Okay, let's do the romance. It is no surprise that I love Chloe Leese. She's my favorite romance author. As I said, Everything for You was a honorable mention. I literally had Everything for You on this list. It was on this list in my second spot. And I was like, nothing can beat this. Nothing is gonna knock this out. And then she dropped her first book in the Wilmot Sisters series, Two Wrongs Make a Right. And it blew my mind. It knocked my socks off. It stole my heart. I annotated it to high heaven. This new book, this new installment in a new romance series by Chloe Leese, it was everything that I wanted it to be and more, and I could not put it, I couldn't not have it on this list. I couldn't not talk about it as one of my best books of the year. Maybe it's because I read it more recently than I read Everything for You, but like when I tell you that this is so good, everybody has to read it. Chloe Leese is just an amazing author, but this is a Much Ado About Nothing fake dating for revenge romance story. I am simultaneously in love with both of these people as individuals and as a couple. Needless to say, Chloe Leese could have taken up 2 spots in my best 5, but I figured it was kind of cheating to have 2 books by one author. So I moved Everything for You and put another book on the list. So I bumped Everything for You to the mentions, but it was to the honorable mentions, but it was still perfection. So yes. Last, but certainly not least. In fact, it's the best, the number 1 book of the year by a very, very, very slim margin, but still. The Shadow of the Gods by John Gwynne. A fantastic fantasy book by a fantastic fantasy author. I cannot tell you how much I thoroughly enjoyed reading this. This is a book that I have been wanting to read for a while, an author that I've been wanting to read for a very long time. And it is everything that I wanted and more. The combat writing is exceptional. It's gruesome and bloody and violent, and it's got the Viking mythology. It's got amazing, well-written characters that you just can feel and see. Like, they're so visceral and real. It's shocking to me. It's like the writing is amazing. John Gwynne knows what he's doing. He knows what he's talking about when it comes to like Viking lore and Viking combat. It's got the Norse mythology parts to it, and it's just so freaking good. And I can't wait to continue this series. I'm also going to start the Faithful and the Fallen series probably next year. The first book is right here. It's Malice. Can't recommend it enough. If you are a fantasy reader, if you like Vikings, if you like Norse mythology or just mythology in general, if you like dragons, it's just so good. If you like military fantasy, combat-based fantasy, this is absolutely for you. You have to check it out. It's just so good. I have a whole dedicated spoiler reading vlog that I will link up in the cards. It's probably not a surprise, but I mean, literally best of the year. Hands down, I can't just tell you guys enough how good that book is. It was just perfection. That's that. The best and worst of the year. Another year of reading is done. What was your best and worst books of the year? Let me know in the comments. You can do one, you can do a couple, whatever you really loved, whatever you really didn't like, what didn't work for you, why didn't it work for you. I really love these kind of like wrap-up style yearly videos, so hit me up in the comments with what you liked and didn't like. And I cannot wait to film my 2023 anticipated releases video. I have so many titles that I cannot wait to talk about. Like, when I tell you that 2023 might be the year to be a reader, I am not kidding. Thanks so much for watching this video and coming to my channel. It means the world to me. I love you all. Don't forget to like, comment, and subscribe if that's your jam, and I hope to see you in my next video. Happy reading, happy writing, and happy living. Peace out.